I had just woken up, still groggy from the kind of sleep that makes you question if your dreams were more real than your life, when I rubbed my eyes and looked out the window, and that's when I saw them. Two strangers sitting in folding chairs right outside my gate, bulletproof vests, mirrored sunglasses, and expressions like they were guarding the crown jewels. My jaw nearly hit the floor. "Is this a prank?" I whispered to myself, but my voice shook with disbelief. I pinched my arm. Nope, not a dream, not a prank. Just my life in this neighborhood, which apparently had transformed into a live-action HOA version of Die Hard. I rushed to grab my phone, hopping no, praying that this wasn't happening. Then the email notification popped up. Subject line, apologize to Karen or else. My hands froze. Or else what? I muttered, staring at the screen, because honestly I had a lot of questions. Like, is there a secret HOA jail I didn't know about? Do they send fines with a SWAT team now? And why on earth would I apologize for whatever it is Karen thinks I did? Karen, the name alone could make you feel guilty for breathing too loudly. She's the president of our HOA, the self-proclaimed guardian of lawn perfection, mailbox symmetry, and whatever else she deems important on a given Tuesday. I'd had run-ins with her before, like the time she lectured me for having a slightly crooked welcome mat, or when she tried to fine me because my hydrangeas looked aggressive. But this was a whole new level. I cautiously stepped outside, trying to appear casual, like one does when a couple of armed strangers are silently judging your every move. One of the guards, a tall guy with a bald head and sunglasses that made him look like he was auditioning for Men in Black, stood up. He gave me the kind of look that screams, "We're serious, you're serious, this is very serious." "Morning," I said weakly, forcing a smile. "Lovely weather today, huh?" He didn't budge, didn't blink, didn't even seem human. More like a statue that had been given orders by someone named Karen, probably in all caps with several exclamation points. "Ma'am," he said finally, voice flat, "Karen said we're to ensure you comply with her directives." I blinked. Comply with her directives? Like the ones that don't exist? Okay, which ones? I asked, trying to sound like I understood the rules of some game I hadn't been invited to. He didn't answer. He just nodded once, gravely, like a general delivering a death sentence, and then sat back down. The other guard mirrored him, equally stern, equally ridiculous. And there I was, standing in my driveway, armed with nothing but my coffee mug and sheer disbelief. I stepped back inside and leaned against the doorframe, heart racing. "This is insane," I muttered, and it was. Because if two men in tactical gear weren't enough, Karen had made it clear in her email she expected an apology, for what I still had no idea. Breathing, existing in a driveway, not saluting her perfectly pruned hedges. I sat down at my kitchen table, staring at the email like it might explain everything if I stared long enough. No luck. But then a plan started to form. If Karen wanted a show, I was going to give her one, but on my terms. Because at this point, the absurdity of it all was too high not to fight back. And so, with two guards camped outside, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, and a sense of disbelief that could power a small city, I realized one thing. My quiet life in this neighborhood was officially over. But little did Karen know, she had just opened a door she wasn't ready for. The next morning, I woke up to the same sight. Two guards still camped at my gate, sipping what I assumed was coffee or maybe plotting how to make my life miserable. I pinched myself again. Yep, still real, still terrifying. I stepped outside, hoping a polite greeting would make them pack up and leave. Spoiler alert, it didn't. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound casual like one does when being silently judged by armed strangers. "Lovely day, isn't it?" The bald guard, whom I'd mentally nicknamed Serious McSerious didn't even twitch. He stared straight ahead as if my words were invisible. His partner, a guy with a crew cut who looked like he spent his weekends practicing frowns in the mirror, nodded once. That was it. That was all the interaction I got. I tried again, weather right. Nothing. Silence, like I had just tried to speak whale. Finally, Serious McSerious opened his mouth, flat as a ruler. "Karen has instructed that you comply with her directives immediately. Failure to do so may result in consequences." "Consequences?" I asked, eyebrows raised so high they were trying to escape my face. "You mean fines, jail, sending me to some kind of HOA detention camp?" He blinked once, then like a perfectly trained robot he repeated, "Compliance required." At this point I realized arguing was futile. I had no idea what I was supposed to comply with. Karen's directives had been vague, ambiguous, perhaps deliberately confusing. Maybe she just enjoyed watching me squirm from the comfort of her HOA throne. I went back inside and grabbed my laptop, hopping for some kind of official documentation. Surely the HOA handbook would tell me what I had supposedly done wrong. I skimmed the pages. Trash can placement, mailbox numbers, window blinds uniformity, flagpole heights, nothing about apologize to Karen or submit to gate guards. So basically, I was dealing with an armed standoff over imaginary offenses. I returned to the window. They hadn't moved. I swear it was like they had rooted themselves into the asphalt. I decided to document everything. My phone came out, camera rolling. "Good morning, guards," I said sarcastically. "Smile for the HOA channel." Neither reacted. I stepped outside again, trying a different approach, diplomacy. "Hey, how about a handshake, coffee, cookies?" The bald guard looked at me like I'd just suggested a three-headed llama for dessert. No handshake, no cookies, no sign of humanity. Then it hit me. Karen had set up a literal barricade at my gate. She didn't even need to show up in person. Her minions were enforcing her petty tyrannies. My driveway, my entrance, my life is suddenly her personal stage. I sat down on the front porch, coffee in hand, and observed. Cars slowed down, neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Some waved, probably rooting for me. Some, I think they were mentally taking bets on how long it would take before I cracked. And honestly, I was starting to wonder the same thing. The hours passed, guards sat, watched, nodded at nothing. Occasionally one would check his radio. Occasionally they shifted positions as if repositioning for some invisible tactical maneuver. Meanwhile, I tried to go about my day, watering plants, checking mail, answering emails. Every time I moved toward my car, they'd glance up. Every time I stepped outside, they'd stare like I was about to defuse a bomb. By noon, I realized two things. Karen was not joking. My sense of humor was the only thing keeping me sane. So I started talking to them, out loud, narrating my day. "Now I'm checking the mailbox. Oh, that's right, you're watching. Yes, that's my hydrangea. Not aggressive, just expressive." The bald guard didn't blink, the crew cut guard didn't respond, but I felt better. Comedy was my weapon now. By evening, I had a plan forming. Karen had underestimated me. She thought a couple of guards and an ultimatum would break me, but I was starting to see the edges of her plan and the cracks in it. Tomorrow, I thought, tomorrow I might just push back. And as the sun set, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink, I sipped my coffee, stared at the silent sentinels outside my gate, and smiled. "Oh, Karen, you have no idea what's coming next." The next morning, I woke up to the familiar sight. Two armed guards sitting outside my gate, looking like they were auditioning for a military drama. I groaned, grabbed my coffee, and braced myself for another day in what I now considered the Karen Chronicles. Then my phone buzzed, another email. I clicked it with a sense of dread and curiosity, because really at this point, what could possibly top this circus? Subject line, "Final warning, apologize immediately or face consequences." I read it aloud slowly, savoring every word. "It has come to my attention that your behavior continues to violate the spirit of our community. You are required to apologize to me personally. Failure to comply will result in immediate action by the HOA security team. This is your last chance, Karen." I nearly spit out my coffee. The spirit of our community, I had been alive in this community for over 10 years and I had never once been told I was violating its spirit. Did it involve trimming my grass in a ceremonial fashion, bowing to every mailbox, performing interpretive dances at HOA meetings? I walked over to the window, staring at the guards. "Well, guys, looks like it's an ultimatum day," I muttered under my breath. They didn't react naturally. Maybe they had training in ignoring sarcasm. I decided to step outside. If Karen wanted a confrontation, she was going to get one, but on my terms. I approached the guards, smiling as if I were hosting a barbecue, not negotiating with armed enforcers. "Good morning," I said cheerfully. "I got your message, very serious, don't worry, I'm thinking about it." The bald guard didn't flinch. The crew cut's gaze remained locked on me. I realized then they were not people, they were extensions of Karen, walking, breathing extensions of a woman obsessed with control. I decided to provoke them subtly. "So, are you guys taking notes for Karen? Are you keeping a scorecard of my offenses?" The bald guard shifted slightly. That was it, slightly. Victory, maybe, small victories count. As I backed into my kitchen, phone in hand, I drafted a reply. I wanted to be polite but also assertive, maybe even a little cheeky. "Dear Karen, I am not aware of any violations. Please specify what I am to apologize for. I am committed to maintaining the spirit of our community. Regards, my name." I hit send, then immediately regretted it. Should I have added a GIF? Something humorous to lighten the tone? No, better to keep it serious. This was a battlefield now. By mid-morning, my doorbell rang, and there she was. Karen herself striding up the driveway, clipboard in hand, perfectly polished shoes crunching against the gravel. Her expression radiated smugness, the kind only a self-appointed HOA queen could muster. "Good morning," she chirped, sharp as a tack. "I see my guards are already here to ensure compliance. You know why I'm here, don't you?" I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out, so I smiled instead, sarcastically of course. "I think I'm still unclear on which directives I've violated," I said, attempting diplomacy. She narrowed her eyes, scanning me like she could detect guilt in my soul. "You know exactly what you've done. Apologize to me now or the consequences will escalate. This isn't a joke." I sipped my coffee, leaning against the porch railing like it was just another casual morning. Escalate how? Fines, public shamming, sending a SWAT team for my hydrangeas. Karen's face twisted with irritation. My tone, my humor, my sheer audacity, clearly she did not appreciate it. She barked instructions to the guards, and suddenly they were all business again, standing taller, radios out, scanning the horizon like my front yard had become a war zone. I couldn't help it, I chuckled, softly at first, then louder. "You realize, Karen," I said, "that if I apologize to you right now, I'm basically admitting guilt for nothing, and that would be absurd." Her eyes widened, her lips tightened, and for a fleeting moment I saw it, the tiniest crack in her perfect, intimidating facade. Victory, perhaps, but not quite yet. I stepped back inside, leaving her and her personal army glaring at my driveway. My mind raced. Karen wasn't going to give up easily. Tomorrow would be worse. But I had something she didn't: patience, humor, and a healthy sense of disbelief at how far this had gone. And as I peeked through the blinds that evening, guards still stationed outside, Karen packing like a general plotting battle strategies, I whispered to myself, "Bring it on, Karen. Tomorrow the game changes." The morning sun crept over the horizon, but my enthusiasm for it had officially died, because there they were, two guards, still, at my gate, sitting like statues that had been carved out of granite and assigned the solemn task of glaring at me all day. And if that wasn't enough, Karen had apparently gone full neighborhood dictator. Overnight, traffic cones had appeared along my driveway, a sign now proudly proclaimed, "Private property, obey Karen." I squinted at it. Had Karen ordered someone to Photoshop her face onto the cones? Maybe. At this point, nothing would surprise me. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, ready to face the absurdity head-on. "Morning," I said cheerfully, ignoring the fact that two armed humans were stationed like bouncers at a nightclub I didn't want to enter. The bald guard didn't blink. The crew cut guy didn't react. I sighed. Guess humor only works so far with people trained to ignore humanity. I decided to test the boundaries. I picked up a small potted plant and waved it in front of the guards like a peace offering. "Look, it's a peace lily, totally compliant, no hidden infractions here." "Nothing." I turned my attention to the sign. "Obey Karen," I muttered. What does that even mean? I imagined reading it to my neighbors. Their heads would explode. Who puts up a sign like that, and for what purpose? To assert dominance over a driveway. But of course, Karen had the power of perception on her side. To anyone driving by, it looked serious. It looked intimidating, and that was the problem. A few neighbors slowed down, peeking through their windows as if to see if they were about to witness a showdown. I took a deep breath. "All right," I muttered, "if we're going to play this game, we're going to play it my way." I decided to start documenting everything, creating a little mental playbook of absurdities. Guards with nothing to do, cones strategically placed to waste my time, Karen's personal diktats enforced with military precision. I even started narrating aloud for my own benefit and secretly for the neighbors. Day 3, guards stationed at gate. Coffee consumption unknown, mood slightly unhinged but gaining clarity, still alive, still armed with sarcasm. By mid-morning, I realized something important. The longer they stayed, the more ridiculous it became. And the more ridiculous it became, the more leverage I had. Every time I stepped outside, the guards followed my movements with intense scrutiny. I felt like a celebrity in a very, very weird reality show, The Real Housewives of HOA Enforcement. At one point, I took a broom and lightly swept the driveway. Nothing aggressive, nothing threatening, but I narrate it like it's a covert operation. Sweeping now, guard 1 observing, guard 2 appears slightly more alert. They think this is a tactical maneuver. Little do they know it's just dust. By afternoon, I could hear Karen's voice faintly from across the street. She was packing, clipboard in hand, probably plotting her next move. The cones, the signs, the armed enforcers, it was all part of her grand plan to make me look guilty. But here's the thing, she didn't account for me. I was calm, patient, and increasingly amused. I waved at a neighbor who peeked through their blinds, and we exchanged a knowing smirk. The joke was on Karen, even if she didn't realize it yet. As evening approached, the sun casting long shadows across my driveway, the guards didn't move. They didn't blink, they didn't breathe audibly. It was like living with two very large, very unhelpful statues, and that's when it hit me. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to turn it into a story. A story filled with humor, suspense, and eventually justice. I leaned against my porch railing, sipping coffee, watching Karen in the distance. Tomorrow, I decided I would start my counteroffensive. Because if she thought cones and signs and a couple of guards could intimidate me, she was in for a very rude awakening. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the neighborhood in orange and pink, I whispered to myself, "Sleep well, Karen. You have no idea what's coming next." The morning light felt different that day, like the sun itself was wary of what had become my driveway. The guards were still there, as immovable and intimidating as ever, and Karen's shadow loomed somewhere in the neighborhood, probably plotting my apology like it was a military campaign. I had to admit it, subtlety wasn't working. Humor was keeping me sane, but it wasn't enough. If I wanted to survive this and maybe even come out on top, I needed a plan. Step 1, document everything. I grabbed my phone, a small tripod, and my laptop. This was now officially my own personal HOA surveillance operation. I started filming the guards from various angles, making sure every move or lack thereof was captured. Did they blink occasionally? Did they shift in their chairs slightly? Did they look like bored robots assigned to the world's dumbest mission? Absolutely. I narrated it all aloud for clarity and maybe for the neighbors who were clearly peeking from behind curtains. Day 4, guards stationed at gate. Subject me, coffee consumption ongoing, mood amused, slightly unhinged. Observing patterns, nodding behaviors, preparing for eventual counterattack. Next, I compiled all the emails from Karen and the HOA. There were rules, threats, fines, and directives. Most of them were nonsensical, like a manual written by someone who believed symmetry and obedience were the highest forms of art, but buried in the absurdity were loopholes. Technicalities I could exploit, and that's where my real advantage came in. Neighbors started appearing more frequently, some waving hello, others offering snacks, and a few just quietly observing. I even enlisted a couple of them to help me record interactions, making sure Karen's campaign of intimidation would have witnesses. One neighbor joked, "If Karen sues you for breathing too loudly, we're your jury." I laughed, imagining the scene, a courtroom filled with homeowners arguing over the proper angle for a mailbox flag. By midday, I realized I had a full dossier forming. Video footage, email threads, photos of cones, signs, and the guards stationed like statues, all evidence of Karen's overreach. If things escalated legally, I was prepared. But I didn't want it to get to that point. I wanted to win before lawyers and courts even entered the picture. So I started planning. Step 2, psychological warfare. The guards weren't just standing outside, they were extensions of Karen's ego, and egos, no matter how reinforced with tactical vests, are brittle. I began small experiments, narrating my mundane tasks aloud, pretending my trash cans were military-grade barricades, waving at them with dramatic flourishes. Each reaction, or lack thereof, was catalogued for later analysis. I also scouted for weaknesses in Karen's strategy. She had placed cones in the driveway, yes, but there were gaps between them. She had stationed guards at certain angles, but they weren't mobile. There was room for me to maneuver, to assert control in subtle, humorous ways. By evening, I was feeling oddly empowered. The day's work had turned absurdity into strategy. Coffee in hand, I walked past the cones, waved at the guards like I was crossing enemy lines, and whispered, "Not today, Karen, not today." And then it hit me. Karen had been so focused on control, on intimidation, on making me feel small that she hadn't considered one thing. I was calm, clever, and armed with humor, documentation, and a growing sense of defiance. Her rules, her signs, her guards, they were only as powerful as I allowed them to be. I leaned on the porch railing, taking a deep breath. Tomorrow, I thought I would test Karen's patience further. I'd confront her directly, armed with proof, allies, and just enough sass to make her regret ever camping at my gate. The guards remained stationed, silent and watchful, unaware that the balance of power was shifting. And somewhere across the neighborhood, Karen was plotting her next move, unaware that I was already 3 steps ahead. I sipped my coffee and whispered to myself, "Bring it, Karen, I'm ready." The morning felt electric, like the air itself knew something was about to happen. The guards were still at my gate, of course, sitting like they'd grown roots overnight. But today I wasn't going to tiptoe around absurdity. Today, I would confront Karen directly. I grabbed my coffee, my laptop, and a small stack of printed emails and photos. This wasn't going to be just a conversation, it was going to be a strategic showdown. If Karen wanted to intimidate me with cones, signs, and armed guards, I was ready to meet her with facts, logic, and maybe just a little sass. I stepped outside and waved at the guards. "Morning, fellas, mind if I go on patrol?" I joked, pointing to my driveway like it was a battlefield. They didn't react, figures. A few minutes later, Karen appeared. She was wearing her signature heels and a blazer that screamed power, clipboard in hand, marching toward me like she owned not just my driveway but the entire street. "Good morning," she said, voice sharp and confident. "I see my guards are keeping watch. I trust you're ready to apologize." I raised an eyebrow. "Apologize," I echoed, holding up the stack of evidence. "For what exactly? Breathing, existing, my grass refusing to salute the HOA flag." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You know exactly what you've done. This is your final warning. Apologize now or there will be serious consequences." I sipped my coffee, calm, collected, unshakable. "Karen, I've taken the liberty of documenting everything. Emails, signs, cones, your little army of guards, everything, and you know what I've discovered." Karen's expression faltered ever so slightly. I smiled. "That's all the encouragement I needed." "The directives you claim I've violated, there's no legal or HOA basis for them. The cones, decorative, the guards, overkill, and your ultimatum, laughably vague." She flinched, not dramatically but subtly. And I noticed the guard with the crew-cut glance at the bald guard like maybe, just maybe, they were questioning the absurdity of their assignment. You ka," Karen started, voice wavering. "You must." "Karen," I interrupted gently, "I respect the HOA, I respect the rules. But what I don't respect is harassment disguised as authority." I stepped closer, sliding the evidence onto her clipboard. She blinked at it, scanning emails, photos of cones, videos of guards staring at my driveway like it was a hostage situation. I could practically see her confidence shrinking with every frame. Her guards shifted uneasily. I smiled inwardly. Victory wasn't instantaneous, but it was building. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't threatening, just calmly, methodically dismantling her power, one absurdity at a time. Karen tried to regain control. You think you're clever, but this is still my neighborhood." "Technically, Karen," I said, "it's our neighborhood, and in our neighborhood, rules need to make sense, evidence-based sense. And right now, your evidence is weak, your threats are flimsy, and your cones are decorative." Her lips tightened. She barked an order at the guards, who looked like deer in headlights. I'll escalate this," she threatened, turning on her heel dramatically. I laughed softly. "Good luck with that." As she stormed off down the street, clipboard clutched like a shield, I turned to my driveway. The guards remained stationary, but something had changed. The air felt lighter. The tension, though still present, had shifted. For the first time, Karen's intimidation felt like smoke, visible, threatening, but ultimately harmless. I leaned against the porch railing, sipping my coffee, savoring the sweet taste of small victories. The neighborhood might have seen a confrontation, but they didn't yet know the battle was only partially won. Karen could try one more desperate move, but I was ready. Calm, prepared, and armed with humor, evidence, and a refusal to be bullied. And as the sun dipped low, I whispered to myself, smiling, "Tomorrow, Karen, tomorrow we play the next round." The morning sun hit my driveway, but today it felt different, charged, electric, almost as if the universe itself was giving me a wink. The guards were stationed as usual, but I could tell something had changed. Their posture was tense, alert, but unsure. The power dynamic had shifted, and I intended to push it even further. Karen, meanwhile, was nowhere in sight, but I knew she was lurking, probably fuming, recalculating, plotting her next move. That was fine. I had a plan, and this one, oh, it was brilliant. Step 1, leverage the rules against her. I opened my laptop and pulled up the HOA bylaws, every word, every clause, every absurdly specific regulation. And there it was, a tiny little loophole Karen had completely overlooked, one that completely undermined her authority in this situation, one that meant she had no legal ground to have guards stationed at my property or demand an apology. I printed it out, holding it like Excalibur in a modern-day HOA battle, then I stepped outside. The guards were still sitting like statues, but I could see the slight shift in their expressions. It was almost imperceptible, a tiny flicker of doubt. I smiled inwardly. Victory in small increments is still victory. "Good morning," I said, loud enough for anyone watching to hear. I thought I'd clarify something before things escalate further. The bald guard shifted in his chair, creaking slightly, as if groaning under the weight of reality. "I've reviewed the HOA bylaws," I continued, waving the papers. "And according to Article 12, Section 4, homeowners are protected from undue harassment, and any enforcement measures must be backed by documented violations. Funny thing, there aren't any violations on record." The guard with the crew cut glanced at his partner. Their radio crackled faintly. I imagined Karen screaming into the other end, "You must enforce," but the laws, the paperwork, the evidence, it was all against her. I leaned casually against my fence, smiling, narrating the moment as if I were hosting a one-woman HOA exposé. "So here's the deal," I said aloud. "You can sit here all day wasting time, sipping coffee, staring at my driveway, or you can leave, because legally you're just sitting there watching me live my life." The bald guard twitched, a small victory, a micro-expression, but enough to tell me the tide was turning. And then I did something even better. I waved at a neighbor standing across the street, someone who had been quietly observing this madness for days. "Hey, you see this?" I called. "Entirely illegal, not a single legitimate violation." The neighbor waved back, giving me a thumbs up. Karen's plan, executed with military precision, was crumbling under common sense and law. By mid-morning, the guards were noticeably less confident. The bald one even shifted in his chair, muttered something under his breath, probably questioning why he had signed up for a petty HOA battle. And then it happened. Karen appeared in the distance, marching up the street with her clipboard like a general charging a battlefield. But this time there was hesitation. I could see it in her stride. She had realized, perhaps too late, that her own rules had been used against her. I stepped onto the driveway, papers in hand, holding them up like a shield and a sword at once. "Karen," I said, calm and collected, "it seems your enforcement is, shall we say, out of bounds." Her eyes widened. For the first time I saw doubt, fear, maybe even embarrassment. Guards at my gate were stiffening, uncertain what to do now that their authority was undermined. "Oh, you ca," she stammered. "I can," I said softly, "because I have the law, the evidence, and the moral high ground on my side. You've overstepped, your guards can leave, your cones can stay in the garage, and your ultimatum null and void." The silence was palpable, even the wind seemed to pause. Karen's face turned red, her clipboard trembling in her hands. For a moment I felt almost bad, but not quite, because she had brought this on herself. And as the guards slowly packed up and shuffled away, Karen muttering under her breath, I realized something. Humor, patience, and a little knowledge of the rules could topple even the most overbearing HOA queen. I leaned back on my porch railing, taking a deep breath, sipping my coffee and smiling. Karen's reign of driveway terror was officially over, at least for now. The morning after Karen's grand meltdown felt peaceful. For the first time in days, my driveway was empty. No guards, no cones, no signs proclaiming allegiance to an overzealous HOA president, just me, my coffee, and a sense of triumph that tasted sweeter than any victory I'd ever known. I stepped outside, inhaling deeply. The air felt different, lighter. Even the birds seemed to chirp in celebration, or maybe they were just confused by the sudden absence of armed surveillance. Either way, I smiled. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains and fences. Some waved, others applauded quietly. One older gentleman even gave me a nod of respect, as if I had single-handedly defended the neighborhood from an absurd dictatorship. I waved back, "Yes, your democracy is safe." Karen, of course, was nowhere to be seen. I imagined her holed up in her house, plotting her next move, or maybe Googling how to reclaim driveway power from rogue homeowner. Either way, I wasn't worried. Today, I was untouchable. I walked the driveway, inspecting the territory. The cones were gone. The decorative signs were nowhere in sight. My mailbox was crooked again and my grass was slightly unruly, but suddenly all of that felt like minor victories of my own. My life, my rules, my driveway. Finally, balance had been restored. I grabbed my camera and started documenting this final state of affairs. Day 6, guards gone, cones returned to garage. Neighborhood morale restored, coffee excellent, mood victorious. I laughed aloud, imagining Karen reading my narration someday and cringing. But victory didn't mean I was done having fun. Oh no, I had a few small, harmless reminders to leave behind just to keep the memory alive for Karen. I placed a small welcome mat at the gate, not just any mat, it read, "Welcome to your driveway, not Karen's." I even hung a tiny decorative flag on the fence with a cartoon version of Karen glaring at a mailbox. Subtle, harmless, perfectly poetic. By afternoon, the neighborhood seemed to exhale collectively. Children played in yards, dogs ran freely, and neighbors started waving to me without fear of HOA enforcement. It was like the clouds had lifted, revealing sunshine for the first time in weeks. And then, just as I was settling onto the porch with my last cup of coffee, I heard a familiar voice from down the street. "You'll regret this." I didn't flinch, I didn't even glance. It was Karen, storming in her heels, clipboard flailing like a flag of surrender. Her guards, well, her former guards, were nowhere to be seen. Apparently, the rules she thought gave her power didn't extend to chasing down rogue homeowners armed with logic and evidence. I waved cheerfully, "Morning, Karen, lovely day, isn't it?" Her face twisted, part rage, part disbelief. This isn't over. I smiled, sipping my coffee with deliberate calm. "Oh, I'm sure it's not, but for today my driveway, my rules, tomorrow who knows." She huffed and stomped off down the street, muttering threats that I couldn't hear from my porch, and I didn't care. The guards were gone, the cones were gone, and my peace, at least for now, was restored. I leaned back, letting the warm sunlight wash over me. The absurdity of the past week almost felt like a dream. Armed guards, cones, signs, emails with exclamation points threatening my very existence, all gone, replaced by the calm satisfaction of knowing I had stood my ground, armed only with humor, patience, and a little strategic thinking. And as I finished my coffee, I couldn't help but laugh softly. Karen might try again someday, but she had learned something important. You can't bully someone who knows the rules, documents the madness, and refuses to take anything seriously. I looked out at the empty driveway and whispered to myself, "Victory tastes like coffee and sanity with a dash of poetic justice." For now, the neighborhood was mine to enjoy, and Karen, well, she could stew in her own chaos. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see her next ridiculous attempt, because next time I'd be ready. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.